Coming up on the Mobile Journalism Show.
Something that we often say is that reality is the new quality. And so people have never been more forgiving of like shaky cameras. And so I think a lot of times traditional media or like professional media, I guess, are very pedantic about the quality of the video, where we should be more interested in the quality of the story.
Teaching communities to tell their own stories. That's the topic of today with Sumaiya Omar from #OurStories.
Welcome to the Mobile Journalism Show. If you're a mobile journalist, marketer or creative who makes content on a mobile device or for mobile audiences, you're in the right place. Keeping you up to date with the fast-moving world of mobile, here's your host and mobile video specialist, Mark Egan.
Okay, so I'm in Galway at Mojo Fest, and I've actually managed to track down Sumaiya Omar from #OurStories, who literally every time I open my newsfeed, you guys are just somewhere different. It's hard to keep up with you. But for people who aren't familiar, who clearly have not turned on their phone or computer in the last year or so, what is #OurStories?
So basically, we train communities around the world to tell stories using their mobile phones. And we're not just creating stories on our mobile phones, but we're really interested in creating stories for a mobile audience, for mobile optimized consumption. And so we're training these communities to tell their own stories, and we're trying to get stories that are from communities that are not being heard by the mainstream media, stories that are not being told and that are not bubbling to the top of your social media timelines.
Right. And so how do you actually make it work? So you would, do you spot places where you think this is not being reported, let's go and just fly there? Or do people sort of contact you? And how does that work in practical terms?
It's a number of things. So it's a little bit of both, I would say. Right now, so we have a couple of locations that we've kind of ring-fenced or that we're interested in. So South Africa is a major one for us, where we're telling a lot of stories, and we want to eventually do stories in all 11 South African languages. Palestine is another location that we're really interested in. We do a lot of content around there. South Asia, obviously India, because we've lived in India before, and so we have that community engagement and that base there. And then wherever we're traveling as well. But I think it's a little bit of both. It's us traveling to places and telling stories ourselves, and then it's also people who really feel like #OurStories is a platform for them to be able to tell their stories in their own voices and in their own perspectives.
And the way you do it is, like you say, it's like for mobile audiences. So you tend to be more, Snapchat, Instagram, stories, that kind of stuff. Why do you think that is the best way for people to tell their stories nowadays, as opposed to more traditional shooting a video, doing lots of editing, that kind of stuff?
I mean, I think there's a space for both. And we often talk about this derivative content strategy that we have, where we're using all the platforms, but we're using it for what we think the platforms are good at. So, for example, Snapchat is really good, we think, technologically for content creation. And in a lot of the countries that we're going to, like India, like the Middle East, Palestine, and all of these countries, Snapchat is still their platform of choice. And so they're already using the app. So instead of introducing something else to them, instead of introducing something new, we're kind of going to where our audiences are. And it's the same for Instagram. We're using it more as distribution and as engagement tools, and on Facebook also for engagement and distribution. So it's really about understanding where your audiences are and the types of platforms that fit them.
You yourself and Yusuf have been to a staggering number of countries. Can you think, but what was the first time you thought, obviously you had the idea and thought, let's try this. What was the first time somebody produced a story, or you covered a story or did something you think, yeah, there's something in this?
I think for us, so before we even started, it was the waste picker, the garbage collectors in India that really it was kind of an aha moment for us to say that that mobile storytelling and empowering people to tell stories actually can have a social impact. So
and this was the one where Yusuf went there.
Yes.
They gave them, did they have phones or did
so
they
they
have
had phones, and he taught them how to use, and at this time he was still part of the Hindustan Times, and they taught them how to use Instagram stories. And for months, nothing happened, and they didn't really produce anything, and we thought that the training had failed. But the Indian government then raised the goods and services tax, and recyclable goods was affected. And suddenly we saw these waste pickers come up on our social media timelines with the #WasteGST. And they had gone to Instagram to tell their stories when nobody else was listening to them. and with the help of advocacy groups, with the help of politicians, they were able to use these videos to amplify their voices, and the Indian government reduced those taxes on recyclable goods. And so I think for us, that was the first time we really saw what social impact mobile storytelling could have. And then another story that we did was the one in Yusuf did in Bhatkal with the women that were covered with hijabs. And that story did really well. But again, it was for us about telling a story that wasn't being told on any even social media. It wasn't being told by traditional media. And it was just the access that the mobile phone gave to telling those stories.
And you speak to, you do speaking, you do training, you speak to lots of different audiences. How different is it in different countries? You go with a message saying, hey, your phone, you make content and share your story. Do you find it is it like a massive cultural difference, or I suppose there will be technological differences, but is it kind of similar every country, or is it a completely different kettle of fish wherever you go?
I mean, if you're talking about location-based, for example, like if you go to Germany, they're much more like conservative when it comes to privacy. And so sharing everything is not as appealing as it is in the US, where everyone wants to be on camera. But I think that the real differences that we find is not actually location-based. It's whether we're talking to editors in newsrooms or whether we're talking to reporters on the ground or just consumers, is that there's still, from traditional media, there's still this it's still something that it's a mindset change that needs to happen, where digital strategy and social media and using Mojo and mobile journalism is not just the side project that's part of the newsroom, but it's really something that's infiltrated every aspect of every department.
So if you were, like, if I can wave a magic wand, you take over some major broadcaster, I'll give you Sweden, who do you want? What would you do? So you're put in charge and you say, look, at the moment it's a bit of a tag on the side. Yeah. What would you do if you could wave a magic wand?
I'd have like social media champions or experts within each of the departments, whether it's sport, whether it's finance, whether it's everywhere. It should be something that is really part of the culture, as opposed to just something that's separate. And I think if you do that, it becomes the conversations when you're pitching stories and things like that, then becomes more than just about the who, what, why, when, and how. It's really about, well, we've created the story. Where are we sharing it? How are we engaging with our audience? How are we making this useful to them? How are we making this something that, that they enjoy and that they'll come back for? So it's about changing the narrative of like, it's not just about this pitching the story as a whole, but it's also about 50% of that conversation should be about how we're engaging that audience online.
And that's something that maybe in the commercial world, they think a lot more about. It's like, video has a job, but it's got the funnel to go through, and there's an end result or whatever. Whereas in broadcasters, the piece has gone out, they have a meeting afterwards, everybody says, we did well, great job. So it's almost like making sure that has a life after it's been created. It's the last step.
And it's also about changing the metrics of success. So forever we've been, even on social media, we've been looking at views and we've been looking at likes and follows, but to have a quality audience, it's really about looking at your engagement statistics. What is your share rate? How many comments are you? How many conversations are you engaged in that piece of content? So it's really more than about just reach. It's about what your engagement statistics are.
And as far as the style, I mean, you talk about selfie journalism in one of the terms. Do you think how is the style different in the way that sort of some of the guys that you're training are creating content compared to maybe the local newspaper also going out with their phone creating something?
I mean, something that we often say is that reality is the new quality. And so people have never been more forgiving of like shaky cameras, of bad production values.
That's good news for me.
And so I think a lot of times like traditional media or like professional media, I guess, are very pedantic about the quality of the video, where we should be more interested in the quality of the story. And so I think for us, it's, if you look at our videos are vertical. They're shot on a phone. They're sometimes not even using the best mics, but they're really something that is at a point in time that captures emotion for the viewer. It evokes an emotion in the viewer, and it captures an emotion of the person we're telling the story about. Yeah.
Although saying that, as a viewer, I've noticed that as time's gone on, you guys have become like content creation machines. Like it's almost like kind of Casey Neistat, style, where on a regular basis there's a story popping up, and the quality and like technically how they're done is looking really, really, really good. What's your sort of process by, what do you shoot on? How do you edit it to get content out that quickly so often?
So like you say, it's taken us a while to get here. And I feel like social media, you have to be consistent on it if you want to grow your audience and if you want to grow your engagement. But our workflow is very simple. So we'll either get footage from one of our community members or we go out and shoot a story. And we're not using we're using basically iPhones, and we're using maybe a mic because we can fix everything but audio. So we're using a mic and we're using a phone, and then it takes us 1 hour to shoot a story. Basically, it takes us 1 hour to edit in LumaFusion. And then it takes us an hour to really publish and engage our audiences. So that's kind of our workflow. It's not a very long process, but I think the thing that takes us the most amount of time, firstly, is the engagement, and secondly is, well, we have a story here, but what is the angle that is going to make this story travel on social? Why are people going to share this? And I think that's something that a lot of times, like, people, when they produce content, they're producing content that they wouldn't necessarily consume. And so we're really trying to be very cognizant of, are we producing something that we ourselves would share? And is it an angle that's interesting? Or is it so for example, we did this story in South Africa about, we were covering like a marathon, and it was called the Slave Route Run. And like, marathons are really can be quite boring to cover. But we did this angle of, like, Kanye West had just said that slavery was a choice, and this was like a slave route challenge. And so we did the angle from like, hey, Kanye West, here's 10,000 people that are telling you that slavery was not a choice, and here's the proof of it. So it's really about a lot of our time gets taken in what is the angle, what is the emotion we're going to evoke, and why people are going to share it.
Now, the thing on social is it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more for people's opinion.
Yeah.
And like, journalists have often got this thing about, it's got to be both sides of the story, straight down the line, kind of thing. And anything other than that is activism. Where do you sit on that? Because in a sense, is it better to have lots of people giving their personal opinion and you make your own decision, or have somebody going in as a reporter and saying, here's one side, here's the other, and it's completely objective?
I think obviously we prescribe to more voices, more perspectives, more truth. So the more sources you have, obviously, the better. But we're definitely, I don't think anyone is really objective in journalism. Everybody has a stand that they take, whether it's transparent or not. We're just very transparent about what our stand is. And it's about letting your audience know what it is and giving them context to what it is, but also at the same time trying to tell both sides of the story. Yeah. Just
final question, where do you go from here? You've conquered the world. There are probably other planets out there that you can take this to. But what's the next 2 or 3 years? Where do you see your focus?
Our focus right now is definitely on South Africa. So we want to be able to tell stories made for social, made for mobile audiences in 11 South African languages, which is no easy task. South Africa is a very interesting place in terms of consumption, because data is a huge issue. It's even, more challenging than what we saw in India even. And so for now, we're really focused on South Africa, but we're still obviously doing our international work. And but I would say South Africa for now.
Okay, well, it's an amazing achievement what you guys have done. Absolutely, absolutely blow my socks off, the places you've been, what you've been able to do. So credit to you for that, and safe travels wherever you're going next.
Thank you so much.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And we'd love it if you would leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. To get in touch with Mark, go to www.purplebridgemedia.com or tweet him at Mark Egan Video.